So this evening is really looking at how we can boost the fortunes of the South African economy. If I can just give a little bit of a background, which most of you are aware of. South Africa stands at the precipice of a possible sovereign credit downgrade. Only yesterday we learned that economic growth was at a rate of 1.3% in 2015. Analysts expect that to be around, well, less than 1% for this year. Government has recently reached out to the private sector as well as Labour to say, hey, let's really work together, let's talk together and formulate solutions so that we're all on the same page so that we can get this country back on track.
Thanks again for being here, and we're very excited to share findings of the report with you, which I'm sure you all have read. So we thought we would publish a report on South Africa. We also decided not to do the typical what's happening to the country, where is it going and all of that. But really, because the NDP and a lot of other reports had been written about South Africa, but we said let's focus on a few very concrete opportunities that will really drive, kickstart growth and create employment at scale in South Africa. And 4 types of manufacturing that are relevant. The one, and I'll start on the energy and resource intensive commodities, right? That requires typically cheap energy to deliver on that. And you'll see that today it accounts for about 35% of our exports, right? And that we know. And what we found is actually gas is, we think is actually quite a cost competitive, but also a much quicker way to close that gap, right? So, but there's a huge opportunity for us to take our very successful services industry in South Africa and really support it in expanding across the rest of the continent.
Now, McKinsey identifies advanced manufacturing as a potential growth area. It says that the sector alone could create 1.5 million jobs in the year 2030, and it could ratchet up GDP quite substantially.
The basket of manufacturing goods that's being exported now from South Africa is actually similar to that of Germany, if you look at the compositions. But the issue here, obviously, is about productivities.
I think that one of the key issues that emerges, especially when we talk to our members, is China. There's no doubt about that. People are complaining a lot about dumping. People are complaining a lot about the fact that a lot of the industries have actually suffered because of the importation of substandard goods. And the issues of funding are actually quite serious as well, because expansion requires you to have big pockets. You need to have the capital. We need to have your IDCs and any of the development finance type institutions being much more, I would say, flexible in terms of their approach of supporting this particular sector.
It doesn't seem as though money is necessarily the issue. Monies are being directed to the right places, but what's happening? Why are we not seeing the results?
Are we spending the money on the right type of projects? So that's what we call the whole project portfolio, and making sure that these projects are aligned with our national priorities. Right? I mean, the third thing I think where the bulk of the value comes from is your procurement, right? Is again, are we delivering on time? Are we delivering, if you look at some of the projects now in the energy space, the initial budget versus where we are today, and how do you make sure that you don't overspec your projects? So a lot of the work we do as McKinsey here is helping figure out which of these projects overspec. How can you take out money from, and still deliver the same quality, but at a lower cost.
So if you're building your infrastructure and building World Cup stadiums or really unproductive infrastructure, and you're not unlocking the potential of these sectors, then your infrastructure will not be very productive and it will not drive the growth you need.
And I think what we need to do from a South African perspective is to find that cohesiveness in policy making. And as an example, I'll say, and I'll get off the podium now, is say if you look at mineral beneficiation policy tells you that you must use the minerals in the ground in South Africa and beneficiate them to the best extent possible. But you have another policy that's being developed that will, in fact, penalize those that burn coal.
We shouldn't try and avoid the history of South Africa. There are a lot of policies. To give an example, the Mineral Resources Development Bill, Expropriation Bill, the big issues around why South Africa says we do not want to go for international arbitration on certain of these particular things because our constitution is strong enough. Those are all very, very, very valid points. That when you look at the issue of land, you have to look at a different type of terminology around equitable and reasonable. And we, as a business sector, are talking about competitive prices. You can't avoid dealing with these particular issues because they are part of the history of South Africa. The political stability of the country depends on us, business and government, coming together to look after each other's interests. What South Africa needed to do in the era of these mega projects was to learn the lessons from other international environments, because mega projects by their very nature are very problematic. They are always having cost overruns.
Talking about power in sub-Saharan Africa context, I think we have to look at in a regional picture. Cannot be looking at it in isolation. South Africa actually is a source of generation that can be supplying the regions. So you look at that kind of demand that is out there, then to support the sort of power sector growth in the future.
We would love to think that there is gas there, but I think it's very important to say that we first got to find the gas in the Karoo if we can do it environmentally, in an environmentally friendly way, safe, and that's very important. More importantly, even if you find gas in the Karoo today, it normally takes you anything from 8 to 10 years to get it to market. The one problem you stand with the Karoo specifically is the fact that there's no infrastructure, there's no pipelines, there's nothing to get it to the market. Probably the best way of doing it initially would be to use it for power. Africa's reserves at the end of 2015 was around 660 CF. If you look at Southern Africa, those reserves for gas stood around 292 TCF, give and take a few. To give you an idea, 1 TCF of gas is equal to the investment decision that was made to build Petro SA. To give you another idea as to how that works, 1 TCF of gas equals 18 megawatts of power, which can power, if I remember this correctly, 1 million RDP houses for 18 years. So this is huge. It is huge. The opportunity is huge. And that's why, if you ask me, do I think it's possible? Yes, I do. Why do I believe it's possible? Because we have done it before.
For example, South Africa right now is ignoring really the trifecta of macroeconomic policy, fiscal policy, exchange rate policy, macroprudential policy, and monetary policy, in terms of how does this then shape these individual sectors. Experience in the recent past has shown that if your fiscal policy and your macroprudential policy and your monetary policy are aligned, you can, to a degree, stabilize a country, right? But we are not doing anything on macroprudential policy. Macroprudential policy is basically assessing or stress testing banks and seeing what their relative exposures are, or forcing them to raise equity. Your fiscal policy is raising the taxes you need to possibly fund an ESCOM. Your interest rate policy, here we're a bit behind the curve. We're struggling to fund our current account deficit, right? But our interest rates have not been increasing at the rate they should have, which in turn is leading to certain imbalances.
We know that when you are selling services, you are selling people, ideas. And for you to be able to do that successfully, you are selling culture and values. And I think that in the work that some of us are doing, talking to other African countries, one of the fundamental disturbing comment that we generally get is that South Africans are very arrogant and very disrespectful. So it's a very key area in respect of us as South Africans needing to humble ourselves and to unlearn, not just to learn, to unlearn what we think we know so that we can actually be able to operate in those particular environments.
Because we have young people who have been called unemployable now. Are those young people going to die, old, not having worked one day in a decent job, in inverted commas?
I don't think that necessarily the issue is about free education. The issue ought to be about income needs analysis, and you provide the assistance to the people who need the assistance. The issue has got to be equal access to education. And there are many, many other things that we can do. You're probably very much familiar with portals like Coursera, where more than 127 universities are actually now loading content of a serious educational level onto the web for free. And there's absolutely totally nothing wrong with South Africa exploring that. We want to see that Calculus 101 and that Stats 302 on the web for free without anyone being paid.
First of all, I think we've got education in this country totally wrong. The seaters are funding in the wrong direction. Most of the seaters are not even talking to each other. We're talking about free education. Well, you can hear, I was brought up in Scotland. From start to finish, my parents didn't pay a cent. And that's still the policy of our government in Scotland today. However, the point I want to make about education, first, we need a CADESA, purely for education. As Clem Sunter is calling for a CADESA in business, we need one desperately in education.
And I don't want to criticize McKinsey. I'm an engineer as well, so for this reason I look to the global forces coming now to disrupt the advanced manufacturing. And I'm promising you, your rosy projection will not happen because it's coming the fourth industrial revolution technologies. And you didn't take care of it, probably because I said, you are more in business orientated, not technical. It's a very disruptive moment. United States, they made a prognostic that they will lose 47% of their manufacturing jobs because of the fourth industrial revolution.
South Africa has to make a decision as to whether it's a source we want to pursue, right? And if it is, we know that it's going to take 8, 10, 12 years to sort out whether the shale gas and how to get the gas out of the Karoo. But the things you can do in the interim, right? You can then build a pipeline from Mozambique, you can import LNG, the things you can do. But the fundamental decision has to be made first as to, is this a new sector we want to open up? And the reason we like it is because we always go back to mining, some of our old traditional sectors, and we say, when was the last time we really opened up a whole new sector of the economy? Right? And we think gas could be that, and it's not just for power, is then it opens up the whole slew of downstream gas-based industries, right? And that's it. It could be our next mining. So that's a bit how we think about it. On the innovation, I can't agree more. We actually talk about it in the report, right? For us to deliver on advanced manufacturing, we need to be more innovative. We need to invest a ton more in R&D. I'll just give you a sense, actually, as McKinsey, and maybe of interest for you to take a look, we just published a book called No Ordinary Disruption, and it's exactly look at these global forces affecting the world, right, in the fourth industrial revolution. And I'll just encourage you, sounds like that's just the space you're in to actually read that book.